11 nights on the Celebrity Eclipse in Canada and New England. What did we think of the ship, the ports of call, and the food and the service? I'll break it down for you because we have some surprising things to discuss today on Seymour Seas. We just completed Celebrity's inaugural itinerary for Canada and New England on the Celebrity Eclipse. This was a brand new crew, it was a brand new itinerary, and the first time that this captain has actually sailed through this area. In today's video, I'm going to review the hits as well as the big misses for this inaugural itinerary. Hello everyone and welcome. If you are new here, I am Doug and this is Seymour Seas, your cruise tips and planning channel where I hope to help you and your family pick, plan, and enjoy your next cruise vacation. If you are a cruise enthusiast, I do ask you to consider subscribing to the channel to help my channel grow. I really do appreciate it. When you're ready to book your next cruise, please don't forget to email me here at the email address shown on the screen, or you can find my contact information in the video description. Thanks everyone for watching, and let's get started. Let me set the stage for you. This was an 11-night cruise out of Boston round trip. We went to 2 stops in Nova Scotia. Then we had a sea day traveling down the St. Lawrence River to Quebec City, Canada. And then we made our way after the next afternoon to Prince Edward Island. After that, we had a sea day and stopped then last in Portland, Maine before returning to Boston. For this 11-night cruise review, I'm going to be using Doug's Ship Score. For those that are new to the channel, the Ship Score is simply a 5-star rating in 5 different categories, and then they are combined and averaged at the end for a total score. The Ship Score spells out the word ships. S is for the ship design and condition. H is for hotel, which is the cabin and the entertainment on board. Both of those departments report up to the hotel director. Then you have I, which is the itinerary or ports of call. What are the safety features of that port and where is the berth? Is it located close to downtown? Then you have P for plates, which is the food on board, the quality, the availability. And then you have S for service. This is the customer-facing crew. This is the internet and guest relations. Before I begin with the ship design and condition, I did want to talk about one of the first hiccups we had for this sailing, and that was embarkation. The port of Boston is not a very easy port to get to. The traffic infrastructure is pretty horrible and the traffic is very, very congested, allowing extra time needed to get to the port. There is one modern cruise terminal at the port, which Princess actually occupied that day, and then there is another abandoned warehouse type building that we actually used. There were some rope lines there as well as some metal folding chairs and security, but it seemed like the staff was fairly confused most of the time and the lines stopped often. There was also a major crew change taking place, which seemed to confuse and slow down the boarding process. Once you did reach an agent, the boarding process was actually very easy, as it always is with Celebrity. They did have their handheld devices and just scanned your boarding pass from the app, and as long as you did all of the check-in pre-cruise, you were able to go through that process very, very quickly. Upon exiting the warehouse type building, you were out on the pier and then you went up a few ramps and you entered the ship actually on deck 4 in Cellamasters. For those that are familiar with the Solstice class ships, this is a new boarding technique that I had not seen before. And due to the fact that this demographic on this sailing was quite older than we were used to, it was probably 70 to 75 years of age plus, and the lines actually understandably moved very, very slow, as it did on Embarkation as well as it did throughout the cruise. I only mention this so that you know what the demographic will be on board and you can pack a little patience. So with that, let's get started with S for ship design. The ship itself is actually in pretty good shape. However, it is in need of a refurbishment. It does go into dry dock in March of 2025, so that should alleviate some of the issues, such as in the cabin, it was somewhat outdated. The blackout curtains in the cabin were in really poor condition. Some of the furniture is quite worn. The dining room, the chairs and the furniture, you can definitely see wear and tear, as you can in a lot of the other public spaces. Some of the carpets are obviously in need of replacement as well. On the outer decks, the pool area looked fine. The lawn club did seem to look like it had some recent work done to it. This particular Solstice class ship does not have the alcoves, nor does it have the large movie screen in the lawn club area. With respect to design, because this was an 11-night cruise, it could have a little bit more complimentary food venues. It only does have the masked grill around the pool, and that's pretty much it for complimentary dining other than the buffet. In our cabin, the air conditioning seemed to be inconsistent, and we attempted to get this resolved a few different times. The cleaning and maintenance going on throughout the ship was excellent, if not excessive, which is not a bad thing, and that most of the cruisers and subscribers that I met on board did like the condition of the ship, but they felt for an 11-night cruise that some things were lacking. So for ship design and condition, I'm going to give the Celebrity Eclipse 3.5 stars. I'm sure this dry dock refurbishment in March of 2025 will resolve most of these issues. Let's now move on to H for hotel. This is the stateroom and the entertainment on board. On this particular sailing, we had a prime veranda stateroom, which is your typical standard veranda balcony stateroom. It does have a king-size bed that can be split into twins if you are traveling with a friend. And then it also does have lots of storage in the closet, as well as above the bed, as well as in the desk area. The bathrooms on a Solstice class ship are very well designed. They're large with lots of storage. What I also love is that the shower in these bathrooms do have the acrylic enclosure, making it much easier than that pesky shower curtain. The desk area does contain additional drawers for storage, and that is where you're also going to find your mini fridge as well as your safe. The desk itself does have US outlets as well as European outlets, but I highly recommend that you bring some sort of power hub with you because the beds do not have power outlets or USBs on either side. You have a large mirror there just beside the sliding glass door. Going out to the veranda, which is quite large, it will have a couple chairs as well as a table. As I mentioned earlier, the blackout curtains for this particular stateroom were in very bad shape, and for whatever reason, the shears that are normally there were also missing. All veranda staterooms will also have a sofa, and many of these are actually sleeper sofas as well. Our stateroom attendant on board was good, but she seemed to be new and a little bit overwhelmed most of the time. We did have a free bag of laundry due to our elite status, and this laundry actually took more than 2 days to be returned. The internet signal in our cabin was also very spotty at best, and most of the time we had to go to public areas to get our full premium internet service. The entertainment on board was actually quite good and had a lot of varied artists. They did have a comedian on board one night, which was pretty good. They also had an opera singer that did a great job. They also had a Linda Ronstadt headliner that did an absolutely fabulous job. They also had a magician that was a little dry and probably could need a little bit more polishing, but one of the best acts of the week was a trio of classical musicians that did an absolutely high energy show with classical music applied to today's hits. There were only 2 production shows for the 11 nights due to the fact that this was a brand new cast and they had never performed these shows before. They did a great job. I thought it was a fantastic show. It was about rock, which I did see that possibly was a miss for this particular older demographic on board. The lounge bands were great, however, somewhat repetitive throughout the 11 nights, and then there was a lot of trivia and other activities that went on board. The Sky Lounge seemed to have 24-hour trivia going on most of the time. They also did a very fun silent disco in the main atrium on one of the evenings. So with our stateroom being a little bit outdated and could use a refresh, and then the entertainment relying mostly on headliners with limited production shows, I'm going to give H for Hotel 3.5 stars. Next up is I for Itinerary. These are the ports of call. Now, this is why we actually booked this particular cruise, because all of these destinations were new ports for us and we could not wait to explore them. Let's start with the first, which was Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now, Halifax is a very walkable port. It has a wonderful approach to it. Your pier area is right downtown at the waterfront, and it has a lot of walkable areas with lots of stores, shops, restaurants. And then as you make your way through the waterfront area and you look up, there is a very, very steep hill towards Fort George, or the Citadel area, and that is an area that you can walk up to. You need to make sure that you take your time. It is quite a walk, but once you get up there, it is an absolutely fantastic fort area. There is, I believe it was a $13 charge for each adult going into the fort, but we spent a lot of time there, had a really wonderful afternoon walking around, and then when we left, we walked downtown and we stumbled upon an area where the Lieutenant Governor's house, it's called the Government House, gives free tours, and we were able to go in and do a really, really nice tour of the Government House, and then return to the ship downtown Halifax right on the waterfront. Our next port was Sydney, Nova Scotia. Now, Sydney is a small city, and the berth location is right on the coastline near the small downtown. It had an absolutely beautiful approach, but because it's such a small area, I do recommend that you take an excursion from this port. The excursion that we decided to take for Sydney was a tour of the Fortress of Louisbourg. And this is an 18th century seaport that was somewhat rebuilt several years ago, and they provide tours to the public. It's about a 30 to 40 minute ride out to the fortress. And one thing I did learn, that the difference between a fort and a fortress is where people actually lived. There was an entire settlement within the walls of the fortress. Our tour guide was excellent, and we learned a lot about the history of the area, and she did an amazing job. When we got to the fortress, people are dressed in period costumes, and they take on the roles of various people within the settlement. We spent the afternoon walking around, and we had a couple hours there, so this was a really nice afternoon, and we learned a lot about the area. After a sea day, we made our way down the St. Lawrence River to Quebec City. Now, Quebec City is an amazing destination. It's a beautiful city, and it's very popular with tourists. One of the big reasons why Quebec City is so popular with visitors is that it does have so much of the old world character. They have not replaced a lot of the cobblestone streets. It is an area that has a lower city and then an upper city, and you can actually take a tram up to the hotel that is extremely popular around the world. We had an overnight stay in Quebec City, and that first afternoon we decided to take an excursion and then go out and explore at night. The excursion that we took was a coach ride that took us to 3 different destinations. The first was a beautiful waterfall area where we only had about 20 to 25 minutes. It had rained several days beforehand, so these waterfalls were absolutely roaring. I wish we could have spent a little bit more time there. The next stop was St. Anne's Shrine, which was rebuilt several years ago. It is an absolutely beautiful landmark and one that you should definitely visit. We didn't have a lot of time there, and we only spent about 25 to 30 minutes, but we were able to take a tour of the main floor as well as the downstairs area, which has some beautiful corridors and very famous sculptures. Our last stop was a copper shop that has been in operation for 5 generations. They were actually contracted to do the very large copper doors of the shrine. After a short tour of this copper shop, we were actually able to forge our own little pieces of copper artistry. Since this was an overnight stay in Quebec City, we did go out after dinner and explore the lower city with all of the beautiful side streets with all of the different shops. And this is something that you definitely need to take advantage of if you are there in the evening. The next day, we did go out about going into the same areas as we did the night before. We went into the upper city, explored the hotel, explored the citadel that is up there, and had absolutely spectacular views looking down onto our ship. And Quebec City is an area that you definitely want to spend some time in, and we really want to go back just to explore that area even more. After another sea day going back up the St. Lawrence River, we entered into Prince Edward Island. This is a very cool spot, and again, you are berthed right downtown, and the seaport is very accessible, very safe. They have a wonderful waterfront area. When we exited the ship, they were actually giving out free shucked oysters. We learned the gentleman's restaurant that provided these, and we made sure that we stopped there for lunch. Walking the entire waterfront to Victoria Park was a really nice experience. We met a lot of locals along the way, and then on the way back, we went through the downtown area that has lots of shopping, lots of restaurants, and again, we had a lot of mussels and a lot of oysters for lunch. You can't go wrong in Prince Edward Island. After another sea day, our last port was Portland, Maine. Now, something in Portland that really upset a lot of the guests is that you must do your face-to-face immigration meeting and being cleared by immigration in Portland prior to arriving in Boston. This caused all of the guests to be somewhat held hostage on the ship until the afternoon time frame. You were given a group number to exit the ship to begin your immigration check. This started, I think, around 9:30 or so. We were actually in group 28 and did not exit the ship until 12:45. We had an excursion that met at 1:15, and that is why we were in one of the later groups. This is a very long line that begins in the main dining room, goes downstairs, and then outside the ship through a few ramps, and then a long walk to the pier to the immigration staff. I highly recommend, if you have the opportunity, that you book an early excursion in Portland so you can be in one of those earlier groups. I did make my excursion for a 1:30 departure, and it took us to several different local areas, including most notably the Kennebunkport area, where we were able to have some time downtown. We saw a lot of the local sites, and I was able to get my lobster roll at a local restaurant. The itinerary for this voyage was awesome. It is the reason we booked the cruise, and if it wasn't for that ridiculous immigration check being held hostage for the entire morning in Portland, I would have given itinerary 5 stars. But because of that, we have to make sure that we take some points off, and I'm only going to give I for itinerary 4.5 stars. Moving on now for P for plates. And this is a subject that really pains me to have to describe, because this is where everything went downhill. Because this was a brand new crew, maybe the main dining room service for the first 2 nights was pretty horrible, and the quality of the food was actually quite bad. I had prime rib the first night, and it was not more than 1/4 of an inch thick, and it was tough and cold. The second night was very, very similar, and we decided, because we had already booked specialty dining for 2 nights, that we would not be returning to the main dining room, and that we would buy a specialty dining package for 3 additional nights in the Tuscan Grill. We ate at the Tuscan Grill 5 nights of the cruise, and it too was a bit disappointing. It was not up to par with the many, many other times we have visited Tuscan Grill on other Solstice class ships. I did go back to the main dining room, and the assistant maitre d' attempted to resolve any of the issues, but after having a discussion with her, having low quality foods that were not prepared correctly is not something that she can correct. Most of the entree items were extremely dry, overcooked, with little flavor. The buffet was actually the same way. Anything from the carvery was completely overcooked, or you couldn't even cut it. A lot of the options on the buffet were all just freshly made breads. You had salads, you had fresh fruits, but if you were not enjoying eating 100% carbohydrates, there was really not much to choose from. Many of my subscribers that are celebrity fans have been telling me this now for about a year, and I had not experienced it, but it does seem that celebrities' food quality has been going downhill, and I witnessed it firsthand on this sailing for an entire 11 days. Also in the buffet, because of this current demographic on board, there were tons of lines. I have never seen an Ocean View Cafe be so crowded and move so slowly, and you also could not find seating during peak times. Many of the ice machines, as well as the coffee dispensers, were either broken or empty. It did not seem that this new crew was up to the challenge for having this many customers at once, and it was not an enjoyable experience for dining on board Celebrity Eclipse. Because of that, I'm going to give P for plates 2.5 stars. And for our last category, it is S for service. Service on a celebrity ship is normally outstanding, and they did a really good job on this sailing. However, our room attendant was a little overwhelmed, inconsistent. However, she finally got to her stride and learned our schedule about halfway through the cruise. Guest services was on top of things. I did lose my key card one time, went up and was able to get that replaced right away. Also, the credit card that I used, they marked it as fraudulent activity by Celebrity trying to put down a deposit, and I was able to rectify that very, very quickly. I've already mentioned that we had a very bad main dining room experience. However, it was a new crew, and when I did return to the main dining room after being absent for about 6 nights, the service was much better. I have a hint that that might be due to the assistant maitre d' watching over them. The bartenders on board were excellent, and they took care of me each afternoon at the elite members happy hour. The service at Tuscan Grill for all 5 visits was exceptional and really outstanding job there. Our internet in our stateroom was very inconsistent, but in the public areas, it was pretty good. So for service for the Celebrity Eclipse, I'm going to give a generous 4 stars. With all of that said, we really did have a nice cruise. We booked this cruise because of the itinerary, and all 5 ports did not disappoint. Each had something special to offer, and that overnight stay in Quebec City was the highlight of the entire cruise. With the upcoming dry dock for the Eclipse coming in March of 2025, I'm hoping that a lot of these issues will be resolved. Also, as Celebrity traverses this new itinerary, I hope that they improve their processes for, say, the face-to-face immigration in Portland. That was an absolute disaster. So the final ship score for the Celebrity Eclipse Canada, New England 2024, I'm going to give the average score 3.6. This is one of the lowest Celebrity scores I've ever given, and I do hope that this is just a one-off and does not affect the 2 additional Celebrity cruises I have booked for this year. Thanks everybody so much for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it that thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help me out. Also, when you're ready to book your next cruise, make sure that you do email me here at the email address shown on the screen, or find my contact information in the video description. You may want to watch one of these videos on my channel next. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I'll see you again soon.